Hi, class. This is Dr. Derek Marr here, and this is good old HL 275 personal training or essentials of personal training. And today, what we're going to be talking about is moving forward to the next one of our kind of blocks of information, and that is going to be dealing with the actual training design for specific components of physical fitness. In the past, we talked about exercise technique. We did a lot working with interactive videos to be able to address proper cueing for a variety of different exercises. Now we're going to talk about how we put these exercises together to create or to address specific goals for our clients. This PowerPoint presentation that I'm sharing is from a little bit expanded version from what our book covers, the NSCA CPT book. This is from the NSCA CSCS book. Extremely similar information right here, almost word for word, but they expanded a little bit more towards the athletic populations with the CSCS. So I'm going to share with you that information. However, if it ever says athlete, just insert in client there. And really that's the same entity that we're talking about. Now, for some of you, you may be a personal trainer who is working with athletes, so that terminology is correct. But if you're working with another individual that is looking for more general fitness types of training, just know athlete and client are synonymous with one another. So as we move forward here, the thing that I really like about this presentation and the information that's shared in the book is that they have a general framework, a 7-step process for which we can create resistance training programs for most all clients that we would be working with and have them be in the ballpark of being appropriate. If we follow these 7 steps, it really should help us as a trainer conceptualize how to get to the end goal that we're looking for. So there's a number of different things that can vary within a resistance training program. Those things could be the needs analysis, which we'll talk about in a little while, the exercise selection, the training frequency, the exercise order, the training loads and repetitions, the volume, and the rest periods. Those are the 7 variables and ultimately the 7 steps that we'll be going through within this lecture. And one thing that I should share, this thing's 64 slides. The potential of talking about this for a couple hours is there. I'm going to try to keep this succinct, allow you to use this as a little bit of an add-on to what the book and what the PowerPoint shares. And ultimately what we'll be doing is creating a training program for a hypothetical client. And I hope that you'll refer back to this and use this as the skeleton to flesh out or the guide to follow and really become very familiar with this and how to use this process, because that's ultimately what it is. We can talk about each one of these concepts and give you a superficial understanding of it, but really when you start diving into it is where we see how good this is at guiding us to creating a great program for our clients. General training principles, all right? Should have had these in some other classes. I know I teach them in other classes as well, but these are really tried and true things that we need to be aware of. One, specificity. So the idea, if you are training for a specific outcome, if we are specifically working on that type of an activity, that is going to be more functional. That is going to lead to better results. Really simple example of this. I worked in distance running for many years. If I'm training a marathon runner, it's best to run, all right? And if we're running endurance runs, that's going to transfer to better performances in that. Now, you can get some physiological changes by biking or swimming, and they could be good, but the specificity of it, if we are truly running, we're going to be better at that. Same thing holds true with things like resistance training. If we are working on a specific muscle group, if we're working on a specific movement, say that we are attempting to bench press max, there are other types of lifts that we could do that could work the chest muscles, that could work the shoulder muscles. A bench press and the specificity of that exercise will best translate into an improved 1 rep max. Overload, all right? So the idea that we continually have to challenge ourselves and give ourselves a bigger stressor to elicit the response that allows us to progress is what it truly comes down to. So this idea and super compensation, although it's not directly listed on this slide, is what I'd be teaching. Here's our current level of fitness, all right? If we put in a stressor, a workout, temporarily, so think of the next day after a really hard workout, are you as capable? No, you probably dip down a little bit. If my bench press max was 300 pounds and I do a really hard chest and shoulder workout, the next day if I had a bench press max, well, it would probably be 275. I'm not going to do my best. I'm not tapered down for this. But if I wait and 2 weeks later, maybe I can get 305 or 310. So then I insert in more stress of the workouts. I go down a little bit. And it's the idea of being able to overload the body, put it in a more stressful environment, allow it then proper recovery. We come back at a higher level of fitness. Variation is important, especially to lose or to reduce the risk of overuse injuries. And then progression. So that idea that we're continually trying to move forward with this. So gradually increasing maybe the intensity or the weights or the repetitions or the frequency of our workouts, that allows us to continue to progress forward. So needs analysis is a great starting point. So really what we're doing with this is an evaluation of the requirements and characteristics for the sport or the goal of the client, and then an assessment of the individual or of the athlete. So the evaluation of the sport, this is going to include a movement analysis. So what body and limb movement patterns are used, what muscles are involved, physiological analysis, all right? So what type of strength or power, hypertrophy, muscular endurance, what is the priority in order to achieve the needs of that sport? And then an injury analysis. What are some of the common sites for injuries? So joints, muscle injuries, what is factoring into that? Then what we have the assessment of the athlete. So what's their training status? What's the type of training program they've been doing? What's the length of the recent regular participation in previous training programs? What's the level of intensity of the previous training? And the degree of exercise technique experience, specifically when we're talking resistance training, our familiarity with the types of exercises we'll be doing, our actual experience with those types of activities. As I shared so often, what I would have with collegiate distance runners is these individuals that would be on an athletic scholarship and are 18, 19 years old and elite when it comes to running an endurance race, but may have never been in a weight room in their life. And I still remember so many of these, in particular, young men that were very intimidated when we're sharing a facility with a D1 football team. And they kind of be walking in like, what am I doing here? And we had some great strength coaches, and the best ones were the ones that went and said, hey, listen, you see all these weights out here? And there'd be the big 120-pound dumbbells that are stacked up, and there'd be big plate weight everywhere. And they'd say, we aren't touching this for months. We're going to start out by grabbing some dowel rods or some PVC pipe, and we're going to learn proper form before we ever get to this point as well. That was a great job of those individuals who were strength coaches, being able to perform an accurate assessment of the athlete, knowing where they were with their exercise familiarity, and knowing that they needed to start at the basics, which was lower than what most of the collegiate athletes at that point would do because of their unique situations. So here is a little bit of an example of classifying resistance training status. And we have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And you can see right there, it's based off of their training age, as well as then some recommendations for things such as the frequency per week and their experience with the skill. I'll let you look that over, but it's a good thing to be able to keep in mind when you're working with athletes. Have they trained before? If so, how long, how frequently? Because we don't want to overload those athletes and cause them to become injured as a result of being in our training program. Physical testing and evaluation is a start to that, and we've covered this already. And I would recommend doing testing and evaluation so that we can identify strengths and weaknesses of the athlete, and then also be able to best prescribe the different types of workouts for these individuals as well. Also, we need to be thinking about the primary resistance training goal. So it's typically to improve strength or hypertrophy or muscular endurance. Concentrate on one of these outcomes per season, and be careful about that as well, because so often what we do is we start muddling these, and when we muddle these, we decrease our opportunity for performance. We want these to be periodized to sync up with that individual's goal. If you're working with just a client, find out what their goal is. Do they want to do hypertrophy? Do they want to get bigger? Do they want to change their aesthetics? Are they really just concerned about improving their overall strength or their muscular endurance? Find out what that goal is and know how these things work together so that we can get the ultimate goal by changing these appropriately at specific periods of time. This, if we're doing with sports, we should be thinking about how we should have a general training priority for each of the sports seasons. So they break it up into off-season, preseason, in-season, and postseason. And what you'll have is this change from emphasis on sport-based or skill-based practice and resistance training. So often we see this from like strength and conditioning work and our actual practice time, and how we will reduce the amount of skill practice, and sometimes regulations such as high school or NCAA regulations make it so that you have to do less in the off season than what you can during the in season. And then what that does is we change it so the overall stress or training load, it doesn't double up on an athlete if we're doing high in both of them at any one time. So exercise selection, we talked a lot about different exercises. You should know tons of different exercises to be able to prescribe. What we now need to do is think about which ones are appropriate. And we need to know the movement and the muscles required for the sport, an athlete's exercise training experience, the equipment that you have available. So it's great to write up a workout, but if you don't have the equipment for it, that's useless. And the amount of time available as well. So often what you'll find is you're working with a client and there's these great things that you want to do with them, but you don't have enough time for it. So think about very efficient, very effective types of exercises for individuals, especially if you're going to be at a time crunch with them. So exercise type, core exercises. These are going to be ones that recruit one or more large muscle groups, involve two or more primary joints, and receive priority because of their direct application to the sport. Sometimes these are going to be Olympic lifts. They may be structural lifts such as bench press, squat, things like this. Multi-joint, multi-muscle groups, large muscle groups. Those are the things that we're looking at, and ones that are going to be directly tied to their end goal. Assistant exercises recruit the smaller muscle areas. They could involve one primary joint only and considered less important for that end goal or that sports performance. So different types of exercises. We have those structural exercises, such as that emphasize loading the spine directly or indirectly. Think of squat. Direct loading of the spine would be putting that back squat and having that bar right on the spine right there. We're directly loading it. Front squat, we're loading the spine, but not directly. We're instead having it in another area. But regardless, we're going and loading the body. Power exercises are going to be structural exercises that perform very quickly and very explosively. So things like Olympic lifts have that element of speed associated with them as well. It's not just absolute strength and being able to move something and it can be moved very slowly, but we're also paying attention to the speed at which we're doing it. Movement analysis of the sport and sport-specific exercises. So another thing, especially for those individuals with athletic goals, is you want to be able to think about the exercises that are going to have a great transfer or need specific adaptations for the sport, and then incorporate those in there as part of the routines. We have some different examples of this on this chart here, and I think this does a great job of being able to bring attention to this area. So if you're working with an individual and they need to be able to kick a ball, so think about things like hip adduction and adduction, maybe single leg squats. Break down that movement that they want to be able to perform well in and be able to do that in a way that we are addressing it within our resistance training. Movement analysis of the sport, you gotta also think about muscle balance. So make sure that we're working both the agonist and the antagonist. So the agonist is that group of muscles that's causing the movement. The antagonist is the passive muscle that's allowing the other muscle group to be able to move. So think about our hamstrings and our quadriceps. If we are squatting and we're pushing up, that means our quadricep is going to be the agonist, and the antagonist is our hamstring that's passively allowing that movement to occur. If we're tightening that, then what we do is we have an issue where we probably will go isometric, but then we could also be tearing a muscle as well. Exercises also to promote recovery do not involve high muscular stress or high stress on the nervous system. They promote restoration. And it's really interesting. We do find that engaging in a moderately intense resistance training session actually increases our recovery time. So it's something to emphasize. And this is one area that I remember as a coach and an athlete, we used to cut out the weight room when it got towards the championship season. We said, oh, we need to recover more. We need to not go in the weight room. Really, you should still be going to the weight room. You should still begin resistance training in, but what you want to do is not have it be as stressful. So moderate intensity or even high intensity but lower volume help increase recovery and maintains our testosterone production. So that's one thing that's really important, especially in our championship season, is that we have high testosterone production, because that is a performance enhancing hormone that's produced naturally by our body when we engage in resistance training. But we need to keep it in there even late in the season. Don't cut out the weight room. Don't let coaches cut out weight room. Don't have your athletes cut out the weight room. A little bit more about this exercise selection. Make sure that they're doing it correctly. We talked a lot about that in exercise technique. Availability of resistance training equipment. So be creative. If you don't have what you would like to have, find an exercise that would still work those muscle groups and find a way to make it work. And availability of time. So find out how much time you're going to have and then be time efficient, prioritizing the most important exercises first. Training frequency, all right? It's the number of training sessions completed in a given time. For resistance training, its common time period is 1 week. We'll look at it in week cycles here. So training status is going to affect the number of days you can do that, because someone that is at a higher training status, a more advanced athlete, can work out multiple days and even multiple days in a row with resistance training, whereas someone that's a novice or a beginner needs plenty of recovery time, 48 to 72 hours in between. So when we start looking at this, a beginner, only 2 to 3 times per week, an intermediate 3 to 4, advanced can do 4 to 7. Now, when we're doing 7, what we're doing is we're alternating muscle groups and still providing recovery for those specific areas. So we're not overtraining or overloading the body, but at the same point, through effective design, we can have an advanced individual be in the weight room quite frequently. The more highly resistance trained an athlete, they can augment their training by using a split routine in which different muscle groups are trained on different days, which I just talked about. So here's some examples of some common split routines right here, and we can see how that ends up playing out. I mean, look at towards the bottom there where we start looking at what appears to be 6 times per week, so only a Wednesday recovery day. But again, you're doing chest and back on Sunday, Monday's lower body, Tuesday shoulder and arms, and then chest and back comes back on Thursday. So really you're only working that muscle group with a 3 days in between. So that's really good recovery time when we look at the intelligent design behind this. What ends up happening is people misinterpret this, and maybe some coaches, especially maybe at the adolescent, youth, high school level even, may only have one routine or only put together total body routines. And then they go and say, oh, well, hey, I heard that this college or professional athlete works out 6 days a week in the weight room. Well, then they're doing these total body workouts 6 days a week, and that can break you down. That can cause injuries right here. So if we're smart about what muscle groups are hidden, we can then get more quality in a shorter period of time and still maximize recovery. Because think about this. When we use that example, gosh, you're having 3 full recovery days in between chest and back. If you're doing total body and you're doing it only 3 days a week, you're hitting those muscle groups every 24 to 48 hours on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. Oh man, that's actually probably more training stress, if we got into talking about training stress, more training stress than what it is when you're working out every day a week. So think about how we can design this to be most effective and most efficient for our athletes. So sports seasons, for those that have that athletic overarching goal right there, we need to be aware of the time that we can spend on this and some resistance training frequency based on sports season. So what we see here is typically you can spend more time with resistance training in the off season and preseason because there's not the demands of the games. Games, competitions beat athletes up. It's important that we still keep them in there later in the season, but it's going to decrease the frequency of it because now what our emphasis is on performing, not preparing to perform. Resistance training is preparing to perform, making the most out of our physical abilities. But then when we get into the competition season, we don't want to continue to train to train. We want to train to perform. So here's a little bit about training loads and exercise type. Athletes who train with maximal or near maximal loads require recovery time before the next training session. So training frequency is influenced by the overall amount of physical stress. So consider the effects of anaerobic versus aerobic training, sports skill practice, how long are those practices, how difficult are those practices, also physically demanding occupation. So when we think about a client, all right, think about what else they're doing and how that fits into your training program. If they have a job in which they're extremely active, we need to be able to balance what they're doing with what our training demands are so that we don't overload them. So find out the whole person, learn more than just that side of their fitness goals, but also find out what else they do so we can make this sustainable for them. Next thing, big one right here, all right? So you identify the types of exercise you need, you have the frequency, you're starting to put together your design. What's the order, all right? And there is a very solid guidelines for creating an effective order so that our athletes are in a safe environment and continue to progress. So what we do, we start with power, then we go to other core-based exercises, and then finally those assistant exercises. So our power exercises are going to be things like snatch, hang clean, power clean, push, jerk, other Olympic-type lifts. Then what we do is we go into the non-power core exercises. So things like squat, things like bench press, things like deadlift, lunges even, yeah. And then into those assistance-based exercises. So, calf raises, some of your abduction, adduction, some of your flies, some of your curls, those type of exercises. So upper and lower bodies exercises, you want to alternate this within the structure. So if we are doing it where we're doing a total body or doing multiple muscle groups on the same day, we want to alternate upper and lower body so that we spread out the recovery within the session. So one method for providing this opportunity for athletes to recover more fully between the exercises is to alternate these. If exercises are performed with minimal rest periods, that method is going to be called circuit training. So you're bouncing from one to the next, to the next, to the next. My college coach used to use this like crazy with us because it was a very time-effective type of workout. Another way that you could do it is organize them based off of push and pull exercises. So this improves recovery and recruitment between exercises because we're alternating pushing exercises such as bench press, shoulder press, tricep extension with pulling exercises such as lat pull down, bent over roll, bicep curls. So just another way to organize it. And it's up to you to determine what's best for your client or your athlete that you're working with. Supersets are another one of these. And that's going to involve two sequentially performed exercises that stress two opposing muscle groups. So an agonist and antagonist. And a compound set involves sequentially performing two different exercises for that same muscle group. So remember, follow that format for our exercise order of power, other core exercises, and then finally assistance exercises. And then from there, decide what you're going to do with alternating either push or pull, especially if you're using the same muscle groups, upper or lower body if you're doing a total body workout. And then you can use those compound or supersets in addition. Step number 5. So 7 steps are going. We're doing pretty darn well here. A lot of information that I'm throwing at you. Hopefully you're paused and taking breaks if you need to. Again, this will make a heck of a lot of sense as well. And you'll really appreciate this when you go to design a workout. And when you're sitting down there and you say, wait, what exercise do I want? And you break down, do the needs analysis. Then you start thinking about what's appropriate for the athlete. And then after that, you start thinking about, wait a second, these are the list of exercises. What order do I put them in? How do I do this? Then you start going, oh yeah, power, then core, then it starts really it creates the template for your exercises or your designs. Training load and repetitions, all right? Here's some terminology. So mechanical work is force times displacement. So we'll understand this a little bit more in terms of working out here in a moment. Volume load is the practical measure for the quantity of work performed in resistance training. The volume load equals the weight units times repetition. Typically in America, pounds times reps. So if we do 10 reps of 10 pounds, that's 100 in volume load right there. So that's one way of being able to quantify what you're doing or how much weight you're lifting, a measure to kind of help us think about this idea of progression and of overload. So if we're keeping tracks, and strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers do a great job of this, going and having the workout sheet, having people write down how many reps they did or assigning the reps and write down how much weight they did so that they can then do the simple math right here. And you can tell, all right, so if we've been completing 3 sets of 10 at 100 pounds, and that's 1,000 pounds times those 3 sets at 3,000 pounds that we did on this exercise. Next week, let's try to make it 3,200. So we're going to go up by X number of pounds per rep. So the arrangement of repetitions and sets allows for that intensity value. And that's really what I'm getting at, that total amount of pounds, so that then we can go and measure it and then progress it. The relationship between loads and repetitions, the heavier the load, the lower number of reps that can be performed. Load is commonly characterized by percentage of 1 repetition max or a repetition max. So a 1 rep max, I think I get to this here, yep, is the greatest amount you can get to in one proper technique repetition of an exercise. So think about bench press max. What's the most you can do at one time? Squat, one time. Repetition max oftentimes is used, and there's equations or formulas to estimate than a 1 rep max based off of it, but it causes less intensity and less risk of injury, less harm to the body potentially. So sometimes what you'll do is you'll say, hey, I'm going to take a 5 rep max or a 3 rep max, and then use that to then calculate your estimated 1 rep max off of it. And there's some great charts. I believe your book has the charts in it as well. I'll double check that. But you can then use that in your design to then say, all right, we're going to do 3 sets of 10 at 80% of 1 rep max because that's what we want for strength gains. And makes it easy if we know that 1 rep max. Oh, look at this. That's a really nice chart for repetition and relationship right there. So if you're doing, 80% of 1 rep max, that's 8. In my example, I said 10. I was a little bit off. It's been a little while since I looked at this chart here. This is a cheat sheet for you. It's a great one. Keep referencing this when you're creating your workouts right there, because this will give you a pretty good estimate of what you should be able to do based off your percentage of 1 rep max and when you're creating these assigned values. I talked really already about this, about how we can do that and how we can use these estimations of a multiple rep max to create a 1 rep max, and then be able to use those tables to determine how you would end up doing that. For the most part, though, we want it less than or equal to 10 reps in a multiple rep testing. You don't want to go and do 20 reps as a multiple rep and try to estimate that 1 rep max out of that. Sorry, the writing's a little bit small on this, so I need to get closer to my computer here. So if I'm looking like I'm staring right into you right now, that's what I'm doing. This is really just taking you through whether you're directly measuring that 1 rep max or estimating it, and then from there, how you end up assigning your repetition or your goal repetitions. It's basically using that 17.7 table in combination with whether you directly or estimate that 1 rep max. Regardless, that's what you end up doing. You end up finding out what that 1 rep max is, and then you create the goal repetitions. You see if they're able to make the goal repetitions. You have a training load associated with that, and then you can continue to progress that training load up. So I will hopefully, where is this? Boom, get to this. So this is our training goal and our repetitions of maximum continuum right here. So essentially what this shows is the highlighted area, the one kind of that yellow color, the big bold one, that's going to be where your repetition max, or how many reps of that max, so that 17.7 table, that's going to be what you're focusing on. So I wish I had both of these up here. I need to get a slide that shows that. So in 17.7, what it shows here is, for example, let's say we're looking at doing 12 repetitions. If we took 67% of our 1 rep max, that should be a 12 reps that we're able to do. So if we come down here, we're doing 12 reps right here. We're working on muscular endurance hypertrophy. It's kind of overlapping right there. Hopefully you can see my cursor as I show that. So if we're assigning that, we're looking at that 1 rep max to the rep max continuum on 17.7, we're putting it into here. So if our goal, maybe it's early in the season, we want to start out with muscular endurance, we're going to do 13 to 20 rep sets, all right, based off that 1 rep max. Then if we're moving maybe to our next phase into hypertrophy phase, what we're doing then is we're going from about 7 to 12 reps. And that's going to be the goal of hypertrophy in that. We're still working on these other things, and that's the boldness of these lettering. I mean, you're still going to get some hypertrophy when you're working on muscular endurance. You're still going to gain some strength when you're doing muscular endurance. But as we get to the far ends of the continuum, you have a less likelihood of that occurring. Then as we get into maybe a strength or a power, and I bring that into that order because oftentimes you go muscular endurance, hypertrophy, strength, and then power. And what you're doing is you're cutting down the number of repetitions, but you're increasing the percentage of 1 rep max here. So as you start getting into power and strength, and if you're only doing, 2 to 5 reps, you're probably working somewhere between 85 and 100% of your 1 rep max right there. So again, the loads get heavier, the repetitions get smaller. It's related to what our goal of training is. Really important to understand this and understand this thoroughly. And that's a lot. When you're designing a program, I'm going to ask you, what's your client's goal? And if you say, my clients came to me with the aesthetic goal of being able to put on lean muscle mass, I'm going to say, okay, boom, this person has a goal of hypertrophy. We should see most of your workouts designed with between 7 and 12 repetitions. And if we do periodize it out and we're going to have a strength a session or a power session, we're going to have those at another time, but you should be able to signify or tell me we're at a hypertrophy phase or we're at a strength phase right here. And it should align with the loads based off their 1 rep max or their estimated 1 rep max and the number of repetitions based off their percentage of that. That's really what I just talked about here. Hey, look at this. It shows that color graph and bolded graph into a table format right here with our strength, our power, our hypertrophy, and our muscular endurance, the percentage of 1 rep max and our goal repetitions. Again, 7.9. This is a take-home table right here. This is something that if I was given a desk at a workout facility and I was going to be a personal trainer, I'd have this printed off. I'd have this cut out. I'd have it stuck up on my board right there. And when I was designing workouts, I'd reference this time and time and time again. I'd probably actually memorize it at some point as well. All right, so there's a lot of stuff here. I don't want to overload you too much with it. We always want to progress those loads. We need to be cautious about it and continue over a long period of time. The 2-for-2 rule is a conservative method that can be used to increase an athlete's training load. If an athlete can perform 2 or more repetitions over the assigned, all right? So we're using those charts. We have these assigned reps right here, and they do that for 2 consecutive workouts. They go 2 reps over. Then what we need to do is we need to up that load for the next time. Great rule of thumb right there to cautiously, because so often athletes are going to get motivated. They're going to want to keep pushing up higher really fast. We want to remind them long-term in mind, 2 times 2, that rule. That allows you to give them a goal to shoot for to be able to progress up. Relative load increases should be like 2.5 to 10% and really should be done at a very, very slow increase. When we look at maybe those smaller, weaker, less trained muscles, we're only talking about like 2.5 to 5 pounds for upper body exercises. For larger, more stronger muscles, your quads, your hamstrings, your chest muscles, your upper back muscles. We're talking like 5 to 10 for upper body and 10 to 15 for lower body. So again, very small increases overall. Again, a little bit about those key terms. Volume is the total amount of weightlifting in a session. Set's going to be that group of repetitions. Repetition volume is that total number of repetitions performed during the workout. And then the volume load is going to be the number of sets multiplied by the number of repetitions multiplied by the weight lifted per rep. Understand the difference between these because on exams, I'm going to drive this home. Because you need to know that. You don't even know it. You're a math major. We write it up all the time, these formulas. 3 times 10 by 85% of 1 rep max. That's so often what we end up doing. Simple math. It's something you can do probably without a calculator even, or maybe you double check yourself with it. But that's really the science of personal training right there, is being able to accurately create these workouts and assign them and to be able to follow these rules and guidelines to progressively increase the abilities of your client or athlete. Step 6, volume. So multiple versus single sets. Single set training can be appropriate for the untrained individuals or during the first several months of training. But then after that, what we see is higher volumes are necessary to really get the strength gains needed for those intermediate or advanced athletes. Training status. It's appropriate for an athlete to perform only 1 or 2 sets as a beginner, but then you need to add sets as you become better trained. And really what we want is that primary resistance training goal identified. And we can see right here, we're revisiting this idea of strength, power, hypertrophy, muscular endurance. And we see those goal repetitions there. And then we also have another overlay of the number of sets that we'd be looking for. If you're working on power and strength, you could be doing sets of 5, 6 sets at a time. When we're working on muscular endurance, because we're doing much higher repetitions, chances are only 2 to 3 sets is what's going to be adequate or necessary. This is stuff I kind of already talked about. This is something we need to talk about, though. Step number 7, I'm so happy they put it out there. we're going to end on this note here, rest periods, okay? So important that within the training session, we have the appropriate rest periods, and then the rest periods in between our training sessions are appropriate as well. So it's highly dependent on the goal of the client, also the amount of load lifted, and the athlete's training status. So when we start looking at, depending on what our goal is, if we're working on muscular endurance, less than 30 seconds in between exercises. We're moving through these resistance exercises. If we're doing strength though, or power, and we're having heavy loads, 2 to 5 minutes in between, which is could be a lot of time. When you're thinking that you're doing maybe one set of, maybe only 4 lifts, and to do 4 reps, one set maybe takes 20 seconds maybe? All right, so 20 seconds, and then you get 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then you're doing another one. A lot of times when we're working on strength and power, there's a lot more downtime. The workouts take a lot longer. Muscular endurance, you could be doing 20 repetitions, but because you have such a little time in between it, you could go through 6, 8, 10 exercises within 20, 30, 40 minutes of it. So just know that strength and power, although there may be less lifts that you're doing because of the number of sets and the time in between each set, it may actually take you much longer to complete. And that's appropriate because the athlete needs near full recovery to be able to perform this. We don't want them going anaerobic during the resistance training session, especially if the goal is to create aerobic or anaerobic strength and power. Let's see here. Already said that. That's really what it comes down to right there, is if we follow these 7 steps right here, that puts us in the general ballpark of having a great workout. I highly recommend when you get to the assignment where you're going to be designing a training program for a hypothetical client, that you follow through these 7 steps. When you're out there in the field, I'd have these 7 steps listed out for yourself somewhere in a notebook, in a binder, on a cork board that you're going to look at while you're creating your workouts for your clients, because this is going to allow you to take the guesswork out of it and be a scientist that is applying this to the population that you hope to help improve and help better their performances or meet their goals. All right, with that said, I know it's a long video. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. That's a lot of really good and important information right there. I look forward to moving forward. We're going to do the same thing, talking about program design with cardiorespiratory activities as well as agility exercises as well in the coming weeks. So take care. If you have any questions, dmar@nmu.edu, 989-329-3370 is my phone number. Feel free to text me as well. More than willing to video conference also. Take care, y'all. See y'all again soon.